Welcome to the Human Odyssey, the podcast about human-centered design. The way humans learn, behave, and perform is a science, and having a better understanding of this can help improve your business, your work, and your life. This program is presented by Sophic Synergistics, the experts in human-centered design. So, let's get started on today's Human Odyssey.
Hello, and welcome to the Human Odyssey Podcast. I'm Dr. Reginald O'Hara, Director of Applied Health and Performance at Sophic Synergistics, and your host for this episode of the Human Odyssey, a human-centered applied health and performance podcast. And today I have the unique pleasure of being talking and discussing his military career and getting advice as a mentor when I was at the Air Force Research Laboratory, Colonel Glenn R. Hover. And we're going to go into just some cool conversations because Colonel Hover's done a lot of stuff in the military and outside the military. Big supporter of mine when I did ultra runs for the military. So let me first get into his bio. Colonel Glenn Hover is a retired U.S. Air Force colonel with over 25 years of distinguished service, leading and directing large enterprise aeromedical training, research, and human performance initiatives. Throughout his career, Colonel Hover held senior leadership roles across the United States Air Force, including Chief Operations Officer of the Human Systems Integration and Aeromedical Safety Division and leader of the Aeromedical Research Division at the United States Air Force School of Aerospace Medicine. In these positions, he was responsible for shaping the Air Force Surgeon General's Human Performance Roadmap, improving flight safety, and pioneering research into critical aeromedical threats such as hypoxia, spatial disorientation, and fatigue, directly enhancing the readiness and survivability of thousands of pilots and Special Forces personnel. Colonel Hover's experience spans human systems integration, operational safety, and functional fitness, with a focus on optimizing training, selection, and performance for military personnel. He personally trained and evaluated over 5,000 nurses, physicians, and aircrew, and was instrumental in developing state-of-the-art programs, including the first aviation adverse environment safety research programs and a $50 million tactical fighter training centrifuge. His leadership extended to cadet education at the U.S. Air Force Academy, where he oversaw the leadership program and the inaugural aircraft mishap investigation course for over 4,000 Academy cadets. Following his military retirement in 2014, Colonel Hover continued serving the veteran community through executive roles in healthcare and real estate. As a veteran liaison with Vitus Healthcare, he led local outreach initiatives, doubled patient census, and enhanced veteran affairs benefits access. Later, he applied his leadership and veteran-focused expertise as a realtor, helping military members, veterans, and their families navigate transitions with insight and care. He retired from the Hall American Realty in 2025, closing a second impactful career devoted to service. Colonel Hover is a recognized leader and facilitator and has been honored with multiple awards, including the Meritorious Service Medal with 6 oak leaf clusters, the DoD Expeditionary Medal, and the United States Air Force Aerospace Physiologist of the Year. He holds a master's degree in human performance and management, a bachelor's in zoology and chemistry, and is a board-certified aerospace physiologist and associate fellow of the International Association of Military Flight Surgeon Pilots. His career reflects a lifelong commitment to service, leadership, and advancing human performance in military and veteran communities. Welcome to the show, Colonel Hovercraft. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Just wanted to kind of start out. You were a great mentor to me. You always supported things I did when I was at the School of Aerospace Medicine at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, both, as a aerospace physiologist myself, and then the extracurricular for running ultra marathons. You were a fantastic mentor. I talk about you all the time. You played a pivotal role in my career, and you still do today. So I'm just thankful that you're here. Great to see you. And I want to kind of start from the beginning. Where did you go to high school? Where did you live? Were there other members of your family that were in the military that influenced you?
Okay. Yeah. I grew up formatively at Edwards Air Force Base for a good chunk of my career, my father's career as a kid. And then toward the end of his career, he went out to Hill Air Force Base as a group commander. So I ended up going to Ogden High School and University of Utah ROTC and graduated at Weber State. So at the time, that was a pretty formative thing when I was in Ogden High School, because I shifted at the end of my sophomore year. So you have to reestablish yourself sort of in a new environment. So I just focused on athletics and academics, and won the Vera Arrington Scholar Athlete Award. Got wrapped up my Eagle Scout, and then I said, "Well, Dad, we thought he was going to be the Vice Center Commander at Edwards," and he goes, "Nope, they want me to go to the Pentagon." And that's when my dad basically put his helmet on the shelf and said, "I'm retiring after a year in the Pentagon." So I said, I better hurry up, pay my way through school. So I joined ROTC and got a ROTC, their health profession scholarship. I was looking at the possibility of an astronaut life. I wanted to have both a flying and aeromedical background. And so throughout my career, that's sort of what I was pursuing in my young part of my career, was developing my flying background. My first assignment, I applied it for medical school, and I was an alternate at Georgetown, USUS, and University of Utah. So
I didn't know that.
Said, "Nope, you're going to Tactical Air Command, and you're going to be a weapons controller," which actually was good because I learned to obla fighter pilot and spent a lot of time pre-Desert Storm workups in Jordan and Saudi Arabia during the early 80s and mid 80s. And then once the war was over, a lot of AWACS guys all got riffed, and I was fortunate as a DG to have a regular commission. And so I was able to cross-transfer over into the aerospace physiology world. And the Air Force Academy had always promised me, "Hey, you ought to come over and teach here someday, and we'll host you as an aerospace physiologist." So I came to Brooks in the 90s, 1990 summer of, and did all my basic aerospace physiology training, which sort of brought together the operator side and the aeromedical side of my lifestyle and interest. And so my first assignment was at the Spin and Puke, out of Holloman, running the centrifuge, chief of training. So got to train about the first 5 female fighter pilots, did a lot of the early combat edge testing, beat my body up pretty bad as a tall, skinny guy, doing 9G runs in full kit, still is tough. And so that was neat because we had all the early operational F-16 and F-15 guys out of Eglin and Hill. Because if you recall, there was a lot of early G-locks and a lot of early lantern mishaps with the F-16 with the lobster eye, of juggling lantern, EF, T-scope, TF radar. And so we were actually very enhanced operational focus to help the setup of the F-16, doing a lot of low altitude work. And as a physiologist, I was very lucky throughout my career to go to Top Knife a couple times out at Luke, where you get to do all the different missions, the MVG, CAS, air-to-air, low watt, a lot of high angle, strafe and bomb work with the F-16. So it was good having an AWACS background, having done red flags and those kind of things to understand those mission sets. So it was a good match for me and the Air Force. And then I was able to finally get my master's opportunity, and the Academy hosted me after I got my master's slot through the School of Aerospace Medicine, and went and got my degree at Southwest Texas State, and got to go teach at the Air Force Academy, which was really a lot of fun. They let me run the leadership program, so I wrote my own book with McGraw-Hill. And I was sort of a rebel without a cause, as you know.
I love it.
In my own book, I worked with my father because he was very formative in a lot of the decisions. He says, "Oh yeah, you'll do well," but at the same time, once I was in the academy and seeing that I wasn't of that system, running the mishap course and running the leadership course, and integrating a lot of different concepts of leadership with Harvard Business Review and the Black Book of Politics by Z. So I used to teach the cadets about the reality of the Air Force, and the SES.
What did you like about the Air Force Academy? How long were you there?
I was there just under 3 years, and I was heading up for my promotion to lieutenant colonel. And that was another key piece of advice, though. My dad says, you can't hang out there. It's like sitting at a golf course. You got to get back into operations, get into systems command. So the mishap course was great because Rusty Gideon, who used to be my dad's ops officer in the YA-10 task force, helped me build a mishap investigation course, would come to the academy. We had General Mark Welsh was the commandant, absolutely total supportive of my leadership approach of very unique, real world leadership issues, where I'd put the syllabus away and talk to the cadets about what's going on in the cadet wing. What if young Airman Mary came to you out of wedlock, pregnant? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Real world situations. So I had, in those two loves of leadership and the mishap and human factors, I really had some great support. General Tad Ulstrom, and I did my astronaut application. I used to fly all the time with Tad Ulstrom in the TG-7. The T-3 had just phased out. He taught me to fly left-handed in a tail dragon motor glider, and so I got a very nice endorsement for him for the NASA application. But that year was the CABE mishap, and the Air Force rolled back their applications and the whole astronaut selection process for 3 years. So my timing was off. So there went that one goal in my life. But then came a new goal. I had new mentors, General Tom Travis, who was an F-15 fighter pilot from my early days flying with the guerrillas and at Holloman. And I was in the AWACS. The F-15s are our primary weapon system we mate with, and we spent a lot of deployed time with them in Joffre, Jordan, pre-Desert Storm. And so he actually really mated well with me. And then Colonel Lex Brown, who became my mentor, my boss, my best man, said, hey, you ought to come back to the School of Aerospace Medicine. We're building this like an RAF RAFCAM Civil Aeromedical Institute, where we want to have flight test aircraft and do human factors. And you got a great background. You're a good stick. You got all this flying time. You got all your ratings, both private, glider, aerobatics. You got oodles of backseat time and 3,000 AWACS hours. You'd be a great match with your academic. And so that's where Lex brought me back to the School of Aerospace Medicine when we were out at Brooks Air Force Base. And we built that human system integration and human performance division. And T-Squared was the wing commander at the time of the 311th Human Performance Wing. So those were... Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but we'll get back to, before I lost that train of thought, wanted to kind of go back because I remember you and I would have talks about your dad. He was a very interesting individual. Can you tell the audience a little bit about your dad? Because he was pretty much a famous pilot in the Air Force.
Yes. Yeah. And this sort of, one of my neatest things I got to do in the last 10 years was when he became a fellow of the Society of Experimental Test Pilots. I took him back to Beverly Hills when they do the big SCTP. And so his formative life of flying F-104s and going to Vietnam twice, flying Huns out of Da Nang and Tak Lee and getting to fly with his brother, Uncle Jerry in F-100s. He had a really unique career. He was a big bodybuilder and fitness nut, so it was a great match to grow up. But he challenged me, and most of my Boy Scout masters were all test pilots and astronauts. We'd be learning survival skills and jungle skills, and I'd be the head lifeguard at Catalina Island because I could do the mile swim in an open ocean. So I'd have to ride herd on some of the crazy dad chaperoning dads out in the water. Yeah. Old Carl McNaughton, the classic best flight surgeon ever known to man. He was our family flight surgeon at Edwards. So Dad introduced me to some of the most formative men in my life that were Boy Scout masters. And then Dad, at the end of his career, was the YA-10 Task Force Director, and then became the group commander out at Hill with the 65 Test Wing out of Edwards that built the Uter test range and did all the Alchem and Glickem development that forced the Russians into some strategic nuclear discussions because they didn't like the capability that the Air Force had built, and ended up, ironically now, that's a threat we have to deal with in your train. but that was a lot of early work. So it's my dad. I used to be able to go out to the range and watch the A-10, the YA-10, the first two test vehicles do austere runway tests, and because I wanted to be an Air Force photographer at the time, and I got to see the gun, shoot the rag, and watch. It was just a great place to grow up. He'd do the Paris Air Show out at Edwards when he was running that, and get to see, hey, that's my dad taxiing in after the air show.
Yes.
So it was an incredible place to grow up, both with scouting, and my dad and I would go out and ride motocross in the afternoons when he'd come home from work. So I still keep that fitness regime and lifestyle. We were avid skiers and mountaineers together. We bought our first cabin together in Wyoming when I was a lieutenant. I took all my flying pay and I gave it to Dad and said, let's buy this land up in Wyoming. And so we spent the last 5 years of his life rebuilding the cabin after it burned down in a big Roosevelt.
I remember that.
So
yeah, I remember. I love that place.
So, obviously he's with me every day as a wingman, and my drive and the toughness that both he and I'm fortunate also to have a great father-in-law. I'm married into a West Point family, and Jim Anderson was master of the sword for almost 40 years at West Point, and was jumping with the Golden Knights as a 90-year-old 2 years ago. These men are just beyond belief. So I have some pretty high bars to reach, and you got 30 more years of your life to be a badass like these men. It's they're tough. And
amazing.
That's the.
And I got to meet him. When did Carrie and I, my wife, we came over last year Thanksgiving?
Yeah. General Jim,
and he was there.
Yeah,
the general was there, and when I came into your house, you said, "Hey, Reggie, you better get ready to be entertained. You're going to hear a lot of stories." And, I was just sitting there in awe when he was telling me some of his stories.
Yeah, his humility, raised in an orphanage, that never stopped him at all. He just excelled in life and had to be independent, and he's raised an independent daughter. I wouldn't be half the man I was without Terry. That's when we hit it. I used to run the big bonfires out here when I was a young lieutenant colonel and invite General Travis over when he was a colonel, and they all got to see Terry and go, "You guys are a pretty good team," So my dad taught me that part too, because I grew up at Edwards. They would have epic test pilot and astronaut parties, with Herb Alpert, and so
those are the best parties, Colonel Hover.
Yeah,
I remember when I was at Wright Pat, and I'd come over to the brick quarters where all the colonels lived, and you lived across the street. I forgot the name of. She was a female general,
Lady 4-star. That was the AFMC commander, and her husband was a redneck Texas colonel, and they didn't mind at all.
They did. Every time I'd come over, Colonel Hoover would say, "Bonfire, backyard, O'Hara, let's go." Some interesting times. But every time I'd walk into your house, it was like a museum. You had all the pictures taken in the 40s and 50s of all, Terry, your wife's side of the family, or dad.
Well, the black and white wall.
Then you had your dad. It was like a military, historical, picturesque home as you went up your staircase. I would just sit there in awe going, wow. I mean,
I was fortunate. I had great mentors, and as they say, you got good Air Force genes, and now I'm share the West Point. So I'm definitely going out to West Point on Jim's 70th, class reunion this spring. So that's going to be one for the ages to hear those men's stories.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you too. We've had a lot of these talks, but you've been on a lot of, overseas and deployments, and you've traveled the world. I mean, you've been to some very unique places. Can you tell me some of those unique places, and all those unique places, what was, now that you're looking back, like the best? What did you get out of that experience when you were in another country?
Well, when I was a young captain, I think some of the best missions, the ones to Iceland, where we were working with the 57th Fizz out of Keflavik, and we were brothers with the A model interceptors. And one of the best controller missions, I had a 4-ship of Bears we were intercepting, and I had 4 F-15s, and then some 4 F-4s came off frequency at RAF Lucas, and they brought their tankers, and we had tankers, and it was assholes and elbows trying to inform some guys going, hey, here's the setup, here's the big global airspace, here's where the Bears are, and then the RAF guys are off frequency rolling in, in the middle between the two bears, bombers. And then we all meet at the bar at the end of the night and rip off our ranks, trade ranks, and tell stories. Those were epic days. And then you go and explore the island, which was a magnificent island, gorgeous horses and sheep, and it's not icy at all. It's beautiful green, and you got to do my first polar bear swims above the Arctic Circle, jumping in a beach with, jet black sand above the Arctic Circle, doing a swim. That was, And
I was gonna tell you, there was somebody I met when I was at Wright Pat. There was an aerospace physiologist, and I was in, they were having I taught one of the aerospace physiology courses, and at the end you come in and you give people buck knives, right?
Yeah.
I still want the buck knife.
Black.
But I remember that individual telling me, oh yeah, Colonel Hover, man, that guy's a madman. I mean, one day I was out with him doing a run, and it was like maybe 30 degrees outside. We ran by this little stream, and he goes, hold on just a minute. He stripped down, kept his underwear on, jumped in the water, and the guy was just like, what the hell's going on? Like right in the middle of whatever you guys were doing. He goes, yeah, that's what he'll do. He'll surprise you out of nowhere.
Well, to this day, cryo swims are still I'll tell you, I was taking care of my mom on hospice up in the Pacific Northwest at Whidbey Island, and it was 3 weeks after my back surgery, and that was the only way I survived that 3 months taking care of my mom. Was every day I'd go out into the Pacific and do a cold soak in the 48-degree water next to my dad's house, and go back and take care of my mom at night. And I still do my cryo swims. I have an outdoor pool I swim in here, and I still love that. It's Now it's all the rage, the ice baths. But I think I was doing ice baths before it was cool.
I want to get into a little bit about, when I was doing some of my ultra runs, we went on some awesome adventures together. I still have that picture of you and I when I was running. It was super hot. I forget where we were. Do you remember we were?
The Kettle 100 in Wisconsin.
Yeah. It was in Wisconsin, and it went to like 90 degrees. I mean, super humid. And nighttime, it got super cold. And I remember, you were looking out for me. Like, Colonel Hover, man, I'm starting to shiver. My body temperature's going low. And you go, I got an idea for you. Tell people about that.
Well, the day started early because you started off fast and you were pissing blood by 10 a.m. And I said, hey, Doc, we need to rehydrate this man or pull him. And so you got your temp settled down, your kidneys simmered down. And then at 3 a.m, you I still followed him. I remember the little guy. He's still on adventures throughout the world, but he was chugging along, and I could tell you were starting to get hypothermic. I was on a 3-4 hour chunk of time with you from 2 to 5 a.m. And so Terry's dad had taught me this trick. The Ranger instructor school down in Fort Walton would wrap their kidneys with Mylar bags from the dry cleaners. And that's how the instructor stayed warm. Keep your kidneys warm, you're good. And so that's where I took that trick and wrapped your kidneys in some Glad bags, the big black Glad bags, and got your thorax temp up. And all of a sudden, you became a new man. But and I've been there hunting on Pikes Peak once, getting hypothermic and hypoxic, and you definitely aren't feeling great. And you got to immediately get hydrated and get your core temp up. And once we got those two things simmered down, you and Mon was his name. He was a good runner, and that was fun because we were seeing goatees. And then that's when we discovered at the 20-hour mark, women are really better, exceptional endurance athletes because their mental state of mind is much more powerful than a male's. They seem to be able to handle endurance pain. That's why they're going to be a great Mars commander. Because they're used to that, where men, I think, blow themselves out early. And we discovered that. I saw it right in front of our very eyes that the women were chirping and reaffirming each other.
I mean,
the guys look like walking skeletons.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I think it's because they give birth. They have a little more extra body fat naturally.
Yeah.
But all the females I would run with repeatedly, it's like, man, how do they keep going? It's 20 hours later and they look like, they just started. right? You got to witness that.
As you know, it's a mental game, and that's where you always were the strongest, was the mental toughness. My body could never do what yours did, but it was fun to see the exceptional efforts out there, and just like me, you're driven for certain things, and you find your niche in life, and that's why I took such a kind look to you, because you represent great value, and with a few helping steering notches and pushes, you achieve great things. And that's one of the things that, Lex Brown said, you connect the dots, Glenn. I politically, I get crosswise all the time with generals. I got my most favorite gift was a laser pointer when I worked at headquarters HPC when I was going on because he said, we've never heard somebody tell a general no so many times, but I would protect the generals, So, you were a great, not just a project, but somebody I invested in. And that there's been a couple other people I've invested in now. They're Delta pilots and, Air Force Academy grads that were young enlisted guys that now are, running full maintenance squadrons. And so that's something my father taught me is that, I made a mistake once as a sophomore at Edwards. I cheated on an English exam where everybody was cheating, and I, as a guy that got caught, they called my father in off the flight line in his orange flight suit, off an A-10 mission to talk to the principal. I thought I was dead. I thought my dad was going to destroy me. He goes, these are pretty goddamn good note cards. You could do a lot of studying with this, and he gave me a second chance. He didn't destroy me. But it taught me, everybody, it isn't a one mistake Air Force. And that was probably one of the better lessons of my life because I recovered quickly. And that's when we moved on to Ogden, Utah. And I left the rabble rousers of Desert High and moved on to Ogden High. And so my father taught me a valuable lesson, that you don't have to wipe somebody out because they make one mistake,
Correct. I'll tell you, looking back now, Colonel Hover, at my 24-year career, there were some good moments, of course, some bad ones. But overall, I would say, 80% were always pretty good, collectively. But I also look back and think, man, I naturally just came across a, few high-level leaders that just sort of reined me in and gave me really good advice where I might have been going off track, and they pulled me back over and said, no, don't go down that pathway, take this one, and here's why. I just look back at people like you, even Colonel Dotson, who retired, who you hired Colonel Dotson to take over part of the aeromedical research division that I actually was in, who ended up hiring me when I got back from Korea. So just these great leaders like yourself that, even today when I start thinking, oh man, is this going to work? I look back at what would my mentor tell me right now? How would they get me back on track? And there'll still be times where I'll pick up the phone and would call you and say, Colonel, what should I do? Because the advice you would give me, 95% of the time would be right on the mark. Yeah. But I just needed to hear it from someone like yourself.
Well, we were good friends too. We were fathers also. And we have kids that were in the similar alleys. And it's just like my father, my dad, and both sets of fathers are always there on my shoulders. And so it's the same kind of thing. And I was lucky, very fortunate to have great, powerful, strong, independent men that taught me to be independent and at the same time to buck authority. It's not always right to just march along. I think my dad made my Air Force career easy because I knew all the rules. I just had to fill in the blocks and perform well and don't step on my tie, and so I always tried to share that knowledge because my dad took good care of the men he had at the A-10 task force. Said his best job ever, and they all became general officers, astronauts, center commanders at Edwards. All the men. He would spend hours and hours slaving over OPRs on weekends. So I missed a lot of time with my father at moments when he had to take care of his men, but it set a great example that you take care of your people, and that was my goal at Wright Pat. I remember some of the senior enlisted. You can't be friends with the enlisted. Yeah, I can, because if you show them that you love them like family, then it shows them that you care for them. So those bonfires and all those parties we had, I was laying that foundation I had learned and seen as a kid at Edwards, and passed that on. And I think that proved good worth, because the ones I really truly invested in, and you were one of the major ones I invested in, have all been very successful and happy lives and great parents and good teammates and great husbands and wives. So I'm just passing on what I was taught. So thank you.
I'll tell you, Colonel Hover, you just said something, and maybe now it kind of flipped the switch in my head about why I was never really a rule follower. Like, I like rules, right? And I like to have very, concrete objectives and pathways to reach those, very organized. I don't like to be in bedlam. I don't like not knowing what to do next. But there's also the times where you say, this seems to me to be just a stupid rule. Who came up with that stupid rule? I don't think I'm going to follow that rule. Although rules are good collectively, there were some that, I had to sort of go around, and it's sometimes get my hand slapped multiple times. But, having mentors that basically told me from the onset, Reggie, you're here for one reason. When you do research, you apply your research, you don't just apply it to get promoted. That's nice if you do, but your central mission is the warfighter. You're here for the military. You're not here for yourself, right?
Yeah.
You're here to help the warfighter. And that has always been the way that I operate. Now, that being said, sometimes I would get my hand slapped a lot, because in my mind, it would be, no, this is a stupid rule. Rule is going to keep me from helping the warfighter, and I'm going to find a path to help the warfighter, even if it means, I have to fall on my sword.
Check.
So,
yep.
Yeah.
That's what I like.
So I think
you got an edge to you, but at the time you're always focused on the mission and the warfighter. And as I used to say, what are they going to do? Send you to Korea? It's always better to ask for forgiveness. Everything's waivable. I told every young lieutenant that, rules are guidance, but there's the operator is the one that you're working for, or the guy in the box doing the job. And we're there to make their lives easier and safer. And so
right.
You never forgot that. And that's what I love about you. You're obviously a great writer, and we're able to always get good funding and things like that. But in the ultimate, that's where your cutting edge is, that you're always focused on that warfighter need, which, here's this giant acquisition reform they're going to try all over again, which is focused on delivering the warfighter and their performance and the things that guy or gal needs to do their mission the best. That's, I think, my proudest part of my life, and I see it in you, is that I spent as much time with operators in their box as I could. And then I do my science geek stuff and medical stuff. But at the same time, I felt savvy and I could habla their language. And I think that's gets you good respect. And you had that respect in the Special Forces community immediately. So I was always happy to tag along with your brilliance and see the kind of research you're doing, because you're operator focused. And that is your cutting edge right there, buddy.
Yeah. I know you remember that I ran for the Always Brother 100, who are all U.S. Marine, call them U.S. Marine badasses, because most of them were bodyguards for President Clinton at the time. They had served as his bodyguard, but then eventually had departed. And I remember going out running with them for the first time. I'm like, hey, these Marines look like they're having a 100-mile run. I could go out there and just see if I can do this, right? Mm-hmm. And plus, I'll be around, a lot of people that are like me. So I ended up doing it, and I ended up actually finishing the entire 100 and beat all of them. And at the end, every one of them got in the line, shook my hand. And at that moment, I go, it hit me, Colonel Hover. So this is why you do what you do. This is why you chose the career path, right? That this is what you're doing, helping these types of people. Then, of course, I really got embedded with them and started helping run to raise funds across where I ran that 150 miles across the state of Michigan. And every single one of them were in a truck following me all the way to the very end, all these Marines. And at the very end, they carried me off this dirt road in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. back to a hotel and carried me in to the room, threw me in the bed, and slept on the other side to make sure I was still alive in the morning. Those were pivotal moments that I look back at and say, so this is why you do what you do with your research. This is why you like to apply this research for these types of people.
You always have the
still motivates me today.
I remember some of that fundraising, and that was a good group. It
was a very good group. So I was going to also talk to you throughout your career, maybe a couple of moments where you were in sort of a tight situation, more like a complex situation that you had never been in before. Like you were trying to get something accomplished, but there was some sort of a roadblock, but you knew it was vitally important for the mission, right? For operational readiness for the warfighter. And you knew, hey, if I don't do this, who else is going to do it? Did you have one of those moments or several of them throughout your career?
Yeah, the one big one formatively, and that worked for another great man, Colonel Sandy Sandwick, another Eagle pilot. Even though a lot of Eagle pilots, and I had, there's the persona, but there's some really great guys out there. And I was a young captain, bucket for major at before A3F became A3F, we were the 619th TRIS under 19th Air Force. And that's when I had broke ranks with the physiology world. I said, no, I'm not going to Nebraska to be a chamber geek. I want to work with TAC guys, and Colonel Green, our chief, said, okay, here's a colonel over at 19th Air Force. You call him, you interview him, you get a job, I'll send you. And I got the job at 19th Air Force. So I come to work in a fighter pilot squadron. And for a young physiologist, again, I can habla their language. I flew in their back seats. So I wasn't I felt very comfortable. And up came the word crew resource management and operational risk assessment. Those now seem like common words. At the time, Delta and some surgical teams in Sweden had started the idea, and Tony Kern was a formative guy in my life because he helped steer me when we were working together, both at AATC and the Air Force Academy, on building this concept of crew resource management, the ideas of effective communication and team dynamics and how, halo effect and deference to authority and, airmanship syndrome, the big watch syndrome, like Bud Holland crashing the B-52, guys that felt they could exceed the rules and were allowed to do it. So I had to write a full syllabus for the entire fast jet community, both at all the 19th Air Force units and the T-38 IPs, and convince a very tough crowd that thinks all that shit's kumbaya when you talk about group effectiveness, dynamics under high performance, high stress situations, effective communication, risk assessment, and so I started going out and interviewing. And so I'd go to Luke, I'd go to Cannon, I'd go to Tyndall, I'd go to Kirtland, and I flew my ass off with all those airframes, MC-130s, Pablos CV-22s. At the time, those two test beds, flew at Luke, flew at Tyndall, and understood those mission sets. And then I started building scenarios. So for some were active, real scenarios that happened at night, almost having a midair, at the end of a 10-hour night sortie in some Blackhawks doing AR with guys that had been doing infill, exfills, and the PJs go, we need some more practice. And the guy that's flying the jet is on a check ride, and he said, if your DC power runs low, call it off. And they pressed in the mission. We almost had a midair. I wrote up a scenario. And so I started writing case study focused scenarios and then developed a syllabus. And then we did a facilitator course and brought in like 55, 60 rated and non-rated physiologists and hand trained them myself, wrote the books, wrote the syllabus, taught them the case studies, got through the JAG so we could have some civilian contractors get access to these unique mishaps that had been declassified. So I had to do the legal stuff to get these case studies so it could be distributed properly to an entire audience of instructors that then can give it to operators. And at the time, we used to have this high performance team training. We called it whip ship. Colonel Green had at ACC with Pete Dimitri and Vanderbeek. The idea of how do you teach operators, especially in fast jets, how to assess an incident and then reassess after the incident and make sure you change the behavior that led to that risky or near incident. And to get fighter pilots to open up and talk is a difficult thing, much less. But when you get them to talk about what they did and when they almost killed themselves, they're always willing to talk. And so that's what we did. And I developed the CRM curriculum, and it was edgy, but it had to be spoon fed. But we did our best as a career field because we weren't rated at the time. Now, thank God, Don White, he was able to get the career field, and then his follow-on super colonels that we had in our career field were able to finally make the aerospace physiologists rated. And so I think that broke down a door that allowed us as medical guys to work with operators and pilots, especially the fast jet community, and teach them how important team dynamics and crew resource management, and then became my grad project. When I was up at Texas State, mine was the ORM checklist. That was my grad project. And I flew with the Cheetahs the whole time with Colonel Ureski, and I got a waiver, So I stayed on aeronautical orders the whole time I was in graduate school. And it was great, because I got to fly. I developed the ORM checklist, and I had it was a no-nonsense checklist. And then Wally Fajardo, another rated physiologist in the buff community, was able to refocus the ORM and evolve that concept. So those were key things that at the time our career field in the Air Force were like, what? But I had helped fine tune, and because I had grown up with my father, you identify the unknowns and then you identify the unknown unknowns. And that's how my dad lived for 30 years of flying, is that he was a risk assessment master. And you can take calculated risk, but you got to always account for the unknowns. And so I took that mentality into how do you build a syllabus in 19th Air Force with a lot of white jet mentality, civilian GS employees that, have been there for 29 years. And last time they flew a jet.
Not easy.
Yeah. And so that was a Herculean task to try to integrate, facilitate, and then transition academic blocks and then try to get them into simulator scenarios to boot. And now I think the world is a little more accepting of CRM, which started out, like I said, with surgical teams doing post-op debriefs. And that's where some of my early days were sitting in heart surgeries at University of Utah as a grad student lieutenant, seeing high-end operators that were VMI colonels that then became heart surgeons. And I saw it myself of how medical teams debriefed when they had a near miss. So it was a unique blend, and luckily I was able in the Air Force to self-actualize in that area, and I think I was the right guy at the right time. And in the career field, I think a lot of them shook their head like, "What's this guy doing? He's out there doing HSI and human performance and CRM. Those aren't our core." And now that's a core entity in the aerospace physiology world. And I think the School of Aerospace Medicine slowly understood that as General Travis became the Surgeon General. Because I was definitely a black sheep with, 44 Rams, because I was put in those Ram jobs, and they're going, "You're not a Ram." "Hey, the colonel's group said, put me there." Sorry. I had no, so therein when you started meeting me too, there's always friction because the system has an inertia, and it's the not invented here syndrome, as my father would call it. And just the acquisition weenies, and the SESs that will trade their mother to get their funding, it was the same thing in the school that you had some institutionalized thinking of this is the way we've always done it. So to get out and talk with operators and work directly with the Surgeon General at the same time you're under an academic environment that's very scripted. So those were two big hurdles, both at AETC, which went very successfully. USAF-SAM was a little more rusty in their ability to absorb new thoughts and changes, but they have a different mission, global medicine. And so a little different mindset, but they were really good operator experiences that formed who I became. And like I said, I thank my father for teaching me the toughness that it took to blast through, the old mindset and bring something new that helps, lives.
The one thing I loved about you, Colonel Hover, is you're very application oriented. Yeah, you need the academic part, right? But you also have to get out there and get in the back seat of an F-16 and understand the language of the fighter pilot, or understand the language of the special operator, the PJ, right? Or the Ranger, or they all have unique individual and group needs. Mm-hmm. But you got to know how to apply the academic to meet those needs. And typically those people, if you're a researcher, researchers will come in and say, well, we've identified your problem, and they'll present all this delineated information, outcome measures. And at the end, some colonel or Ranger regimented commander will say, we already know that's our problem. We have you here to help solve the problem. And, that's what a lot of people would tell me, O'Hara, we think of researchers as, well, they're just going to gather a bunch of data, analyze the data, publish it, and tell us what we already know. But they don't tell us how to help. What are some suggested options to help resolve the issues we're actually having? Yep. So the application, as far as you're concerned, I think you would probably say that it fundamentally makes a huge difference in, you get into these very specialized military populations. It's like a whole nother world.
Yeah, I was fortunate to have these mentors, these pilot physician crowd that adopted me and let me, participate in their reindeer games and help contribute. I was neither a pilot nor a doctor, but I think they formatively accomplished a lot in my latter years, and like I said, to have great mentors like General Travis and Lex Brown that would support me in the rover mode, and they would tell me, I want you to rove. I don't want you to break the rules or be too disobedient, but make them uncomfortable. Go out there and poke noses and make things happen, because the ultimate goal is to deliver to the operator, and the man in the box is the most important thing. And that's some of our PowerPoint slides became epic, because the couple of those I made for General Travis became the interspace battle, with the FIBA and the FLOT and Patriots and J-Stars and Link 16. And we made some of these cosmic PowerPoints that would explain how human system integration across the spectrum of, now they call it multi-domain awareness. It's all been evolved, but it was sure fun starting these concepts in a community that was like, what are you guys talking about? But now this is our major focus, inner service, multi-domain. Those are some of the best experiences, flying off of carriers on the rig, and, working with as an air defense liaison with the Patriot battalions and the Hawk and the Chaparrals, and seeing how, 54 rail cars are unloaded and a radar mast horizon set up. And, you're working with a young, captain that's a platoon commander for Patriots. I was very fortunate, to see fleet X's and see Army deployment and integrate that into my mindset. So I feel very lucky that I got the career I got, and things all the dominoes fell in the right way, and I had great people around me. So, makes me feel good when then you're even interested in hearing a story, much less complimenting, but you were a big part of that, because you don't find fire plugs like you that are Energizer bunnies and again, I like that, because you had an edge on you and you're willing to make things happen. And, guidance and instructions are just that, guidance and instructions. You still have to make the mission happen for the operators and the pilots and who we serve. So you never forgot.
Yeah, we serve, Colonel Hover. I want to lastly get into, I can't let you go without talking about some of your crazy, I know I've had mine, physical adventures, like hiking, running, your biking. I know you were a big swimmer, really good at swimming. what were some of what got you, we kind of know what got you into that based on your childhood and high school, but when you started just doing it, when you were in the Air Force and even today, what are some of your favorite things you like to do? Like you get basically, we call the adrenaline rush, Colonel Hover.
Yeah, apparently that was one of the things General Travis noted. Yeah, you do have a high-risk lifestyle, buddy, from hunting boars to bow and arrow to, skiing down a mountain by yourself. And again, it would start with my father when he would let me go do powder runs up at Powder Mountain, Snow Basin as a teenager, and got that love of the mountains and the hiss of the snow all by myself that I'd hiked a ridge. And to this day, I still set those goals right now, even after back surgery. And I just had my injections this week from one of my academy cadets that's now a neurosurgeon. These guys that have rebuilt my shoulders and backs, they were all cadets at the academy when I was there in the 90s and early 2000s. So, hike, bike, ski, hunt, fish, drive race cars, those are the things that were goals, and I've tried to meet them all at the same time, play caregiver. But I would say some of the most fun physical events, it was, I used to race bicycles in college in Utah and high school. And so I got to ride the Rockies with the Air Force team. Those were a couple of good times and my father and my sister that both passed in the last 2 years, were my pit muffins, and had great support. So that was a great physical event, and you were a part of a team. To doing the Pikes Peak Marathon, and being part of the Air Force Academy running team there. We had a lot of the instructors, and you prove yourself a lot of times, and then all the way to Wright Pat. Just, I think my favorite part of being the chief of the aerospace physiology division was running PT with the guys and going out playing soccer with them and being in the weight room. Colonel Graham, one of our mentor physiologists at Holloman, we'd always hit the weight room at 3:30 after we finished training the pilots and have a Miller and I got these cadets or these young enlisted to go to jump school with me out at the Air Force Academy. And they've continued to this day to be exceptional people. So I always tried to tie my fitness to an Air Force and then lead from the front and getting those coins. Even though I know I wasn't always the most popular guy at USAF SAM as an 06, I would always get my commander's coin because I got 100 on my fitness test. And the young enlisted always saw that. And they were like, huh?
Yeah.
So those are fun goals. And now my goals are, to, like I said, meet, and like you said, it's not an adrenaline rush. I see it as a goal to keep driving and don't give up. When you see these men in their 90s jumping out of airplanes, and, my father was running the cabin and they're men of great capability. And I got 30 more years to be a tough guy, badass, and me and my little back. So I try to work through everything, and Terry gives me the reins to ski solo or, set goals. So one of my big goals this year, again, is to ski into the cabin in March on, with crampons and skins and go up and live at the cabin with 4 feet of snow with no water. You have to haul in everything. And, that's a nature adventure.
Sounds like fun. I want to go.
And yes, you're welcome anytime. I'll get you you and Carrie would enjoy up there. And, so the physical part of me is important because it keeps your head straight. You got to have that drive, and that's who is part of us. And I've tried to teach that to my daughters, to be independent young women, and always keep that physical fitness. And I see they live those lifestyles and have gravitated toward men that do that, which makes me feel good that I'm passing that on to them.
Really good.
I was lucky to have a lifestyle. Now the Air Force always affords you that lifestyle of fitness, and now the VA and your disability rating, you definitely earned it because the military beat the shit out of our bodies, and I'm fortunate I have that time and financial capability to still train daily 2 hours a day. I do my PT and fitness and swim and yoga and Tai Chi and
love it,
manage pain, and that's a big part of. I totally get. And my little sister passed this year, and she was a much more physical specimen than me, but I had no idea she was struggling with pain, and I didn't know it until about 2 weeks prior. So that was a tough wound because my father thought of her like the little fighter pilot in the family. She was the apple's eye. So that's been, you know what suffering loss is too. And so the fitness regime is part of the wheel of spiritual, friends, life, work. and fitness. There's this wheel, and I try to always teach that hub, both the young people and my kids, and you get that, and the battles of, what chronic pain does.
I know the battles. I know.
I'm glad if I even helped you through some of that. I know, I could see that your body took some beatings, and so
it took some beatings a lot.
We carry on when you see these men, like I said, in their 90s. They're absolutely inspirational. But keep on keeping on, as my dad said, and so that's my motto. And I think it all started in Scouts, doing that 1 mile swim out in the open ocean in 60-degree water to be rugged So you didn't have to sit around and do basket weaving. You got to go out and explore caves at night, hunt boar, and climb cliffs. It was because we had, like I said, we had test pilots and astronauts as our Boy Scout masters. It was incredible experience growing up at Edwards, because just the mentors were out the door exceptional. And to this day, I still write them Christmas cards. So that's the lesson that I've learned and hope to pass on for any young officer or enlisted, that, find the good ones, mentor with them, emulate those behaviors, and that was my old lady, Mrs. Ellertson at Ogden High, taught me to model one of the top seniors that was heading to Harvard, that was a class president. He said, you learn how Bob Madsen does this and writes his resume. And once you learn those key tasks to promote, you do have to promote yourself a little bit to work your way through the military. Nobody's going to hold your hand.
You're right.
So it's not careerism, but it is, you've got to take care of yourself at the same time so you can take care of your others, that are your subordinates and the people around you. So
Well, I know one thing, Colonel Hover, you came to my wedding in Hilton Head Island, and you drove, am I right, all the way from Texas to South Carolina, or I think you were going somewhere else at the time.
General Jim's wife was doing a move, and so I offered to help move all this furniture of theirs out, distributed amongst all their children. So there was an alternate, it's always the dual mission. But
dual mission.
I hope I didn't invite myself too hard, but I definitely want to see you and Carrie. I wanted to see you happy. And
I loved having you. Do you still have? I think you still have the white truck, the tank, right?
Well, and you take care of your kids. My daughter had to move into an Airstream this year, and I gave her my beautiful Duramax that I took care of as a cream puff, and she got in a significant accident, protected her life, which is good, but Bessie's gone, and so I had to get I got a chick truck, the Trail Boss. And immediately, the big Corvette engine that Chevy put in it, they put it on an immediate recall. Loss of propulsion, loss of life. And you're like, well, that's a hell of an engine. So I'm driving the new, I call it the pirate truck. It hasn't exploded on me yet, but so I've got it, but it's much better on my back. It's the Trail Bosses.
I love that truck.
Yeah.
I love that truck. I remember, coming back, falling asleep in the back.
It isn't.
You're like on the phone. He's out in the back of the. He's not going to wake up.
That's a good 21 years of good memories, and that was a good one. Yeah, the showing up in with the Duramax. That's good. That was
Loved
the Isuzu motor that they used in Desert Storm. That's why that motor was so good. It was a Huel motor mod by German, so it was an awesome engine in that vehicle.
I was going to ask you too. How much long? When are you going to go back to Montana to your cabin?
That's the family joke. Everyone on earth thinks we live in Montana. I am a Wyoming boy.
You don't, but
I am a Wyoming boy, tried and true. When I was a lieutenant, I went up there for mountaineering school with the Jackson Hole Mountain Guides and got hooked and started doing roundups and brandings with my father and his friends. And so we live in Bondurant, Wyoming. And that has become, Miss Terry, her Nordic people don't do heat. So I think that's going to be our new lifestyle is 5-6 months in Wyoming, 5-6 months here in Texas. So it's just learning to juggle the two lives. And that's my father's legacy. And it's a Jackson Hole Land Trust. So it's always protected. And it's been fun caring for the land and clearing the dead trees from the big fire. And that was some of my most formative time with my father, the last 5 years, where we rebuilt the cabin. He was a program manager to his last breath. And I heard more stories about what he did in Da Nang and coming back with bunks empty as squadron commander and DO that had been shot down, the first week of the war. And I heard adventures and conquests and doing his life review. And so those 5 years I wouldn't trade of taking my dad through those 3 surgeries and taking him to SETP with his becoming a fellow, and his class was, Stafford, Mattingly. And those men all passed this last year or two. And so he's, was proud to be part of his life and even half share those stories he told me about. So if I can keep on keeping on for the next 30 years and pass that on to my next generation. And I think both the girls came up and visited the cabin this year, and I think they both appreciate the work that it took. And, that's when I got hooked in my young 20s on Wyoming, as a teenager in Wyoming. So, but yeah, everybody always thinks we live in Montana. So we live in Montana. Yeah,
get your horses out there.
That's right. That's where the Fruit Loops live around Bozeman, and Wyoming is a oil man and hunter, and everybody packs, and it's a land of the lost out there. And
sounds like a good place to be.
Yeah,
it sounds like a real good place to be. Well, I think we'll wrap it up, Colonel Hover. This is going to wrap it up for this edition of the Human Odyssey podcast. Where can people find you? Just LinkedIn, or are you on Facebook?
I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. Yeah, and I even do an Instagram. Glenn R. Hover, I think, is my Instagram. And mostly, I just post, military related or nature pictures, or, try to keep people up to date with my cabin. LinkedIn, obviously, I'm transitioning more to a full retired lifestyle, even though my broker wants me to stay help, which, mentoring is good. And once in a while I get to help somebody, a young couple or an elder or an executor. I typically help a lot of executors sell their houses because that's what I do for my family. But other than that, Terry and I are going to hold down the fort for the next 5-6 months here. And my cell phone is out there on LinkedIn to boot. You're welcome to share it if somebody asks, or pass them on to me.
Yeah.
If anybody wants it.
Thanks. Absolutely. Thanks for joining us, Colonel Hover, taking the time to do this today. And thanks everyone for listening out there, wherever you are tuning in. This has been episode number 17 of the Human Odyssey Podcast, the human-centered podcast. Our podcast is available online at sophicsynergistics.com/podcast. Video versions can also be found on YouTube, Spotify, and audio versions are available to stream on Apple Podcasts and all other platforms. Keep an eye out on our social media as well, social media platforms for updates on the Human Odyssey Podcast. And we're also on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and X. Thank you again, everyone, for listening. Colonel Hover, it's great seeing you. I need to come out there to Hard Luck Road.
Yeah, all right. You're welcome. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
The Human Odyssey is presented by Sophic Synergistics, the experts in human-centered design. Find out more at sophicsynergistics.com. Get smart. Get Sophic smart.